Still, Yeshua was the only way, there ain't no other option. Christianity's a white man's religion. Stop lying, speak with precision. Stop buying what they teach in the prisons. Don't be deceived, pick truth over fiction. They say that Christianity's a white man's religion, but stop lying, speak with precision. Stop buying what they teach in the prisons. Don't be deceived, pick truth over fiction. It's crazy, but most...
Oh yeah, in my song White Man's Religion, I talk about the fact that Christianity was in Africa for over 1,500 years before the transatlantic slave trade. I also talk about the fact that we have African people all through the Bible. And I also wanted in this conversation to highlight the different regions, different places where Christianity is found, to remind people that this is a global faith. It actually started in the East. It says the white man's religion, it started in Israel, and then it went to, Africa and different parts of the world from there, Europe and other places, modern day Turkey, all these places that are not populated by European people necessarily. And I wanted people from different backgrounds to talk about their experience with Christianity. So the question I want to ask everybody is, have you ever heard the claim that Christianity is a white man's religion? If so, how do you respond to that and what comes to mind? And a follow-up question, if you have not heard that Christianity is a white man's religion, the same thing. How do you respond to that and what comes to mind?
Christianity is a white man's religion. A couple of years ago, back in Africa. And I think it was in the context of we were going through a land redistribution from colonialism, post-colonialism. There's a Pan-Africanist movement sweeping through Africa as a whole. So I think it was this disassociation. With colonialism came religion. When we look back at the history, it actually has been positive. Missionary schools were set up, so local people have been educated, but missionary hospitals also set up. So there's been the positive. So the role the church played wasn't, they didn't come in, most of it generally, to prop up colonialism. It was the church's avenue to say, we want to share the gospel, but we're also meeting the needs of the local people. But some may argue, what were they teaching in this education system? So there are pros and cons to what came with Christianity, and the question, is Christianity a white man's religion? When I think about it, my initial response is, it goes back to identity and just how do we view ourselves in this conversation of the meta-narrative. The bigger conversation is the world is dominated by a Western perspective. So we're trying to deconstruct that, but then we're trying to own, in a lot of ways, things that are actually not ours. So I do hear some people will say, well, Jesus was black. Jesus was African. No, there's some Bible characters who are of African descent. Yeah. And Jesus is a Hebrew. He's an Israelite. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, if you look at his ethnicity, that's where he comes from. So we can't try and reconstruct who Jesus was based on my position or my struggle with self-identity. Yeah. So when I look at Christianity, I want to look at it from who actually, ethnically, where he comes from, but is that a game changer for Jesus? Does that change my beliefs foundationally? No. But it's a struggle person of how I view myself and how I view the narrative in the world, Western perspective, and am I secure in my perspective? And that goes on so many different rabbit holes. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard that claim. Again, with my background, Inglewood, Woodlawn, Chicago, pretty much predominantly black neighborhoods. We're currently being bombarded with black liberalism of Christianity, trying to, as you said, TK, re-identify the people of the scripture, especially Jesus as an African American, well, not an African American, but an African. Yeah. So I think it's buffoonery. Off top, so that's my initial response. It's absolutely buffoonery. But how do I respond? I think 4 real quick points that I like to make. The first one, the black presence or the African presence in the Bible, in the scriptures. And I think this is a futile attempt to argue it sometimes, because I don't think every ethnic group can find themselves in the scripture. So I really hate even starting there. Yeah. But for the sake of the attack that we get in our community, you have to start there, right? I think about Old Testament, you know, where we know that Ham and all of his descendants are, you know, from African descent. Or as you progress yourself into the New Testament, people like Simon of Cyrene, modern day Libya, the Ethiopian eunuch, you know, it's just so many clear examples of African presence within the Bible. But then one of the second arguments that come out is, well, we received Christianity through the transatlantic slave trade, right? So, or you know, at the Council of Nicaea is where the Bible was invented, right? Christianity was invented, and I meshed those two arguments together, and I think let's go with the transatlantic slave trade. Earliest date, 1480, right? Portuguese began to move across, you know, the Atlantic to, you know, enslave Africans. If you take that earliest date and the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, that's a 1,200-year period, right? That the foresight that it would take to say, let's create a Bible, and in 1,200 years we're going to be able to enslave a group of people. Like humans are not that smart to even, you know, bring that thought up. So I think initially that goes there. And for the record, the Council of Nicaea was an argument about the deity of Christ, and it was just really to affirm what the scriptures and the apostles had already taught. But then a third thing pops up is like, wasn't there black church fathers? You know, Augustine the Hippo just coming right off the tip of my, you know, off the tip, right, Athanasius coming off, like, these are guys that, again, predate all of these ideas about, you know, Christianity being the white man's religion. But ultimately, I hedge my bet on this last one. I think this is profound, right? Let's assume for a second Jesus was a white man, right? Again, we just take our imagination there for a second. But when we think about the implications of the gospel, right? Think about the implications of the gospel. He's a white man. Let's claim him to be a white man right now. But the implications of the gospel talks about, right, the inclusion of it. You know, I think about Romans 3:23 that says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And I just believe all covers everybody, right? In any language, all is all. Right, so that's the need of the gospel. We've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But then the extent of the gospel, right? Romans 10:13, whosoever will call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. You know, and then finally you think about the results of the gospel, Romans 8:1, where it talks about now there is no more condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. If Jesus is a white man, he is a white man that's okay with me. I am proud of that white man, right? Like, brothers, he's number one on my list because the implications of the gospel message is too serious for us to be too concerned about the ethnicity of Jesus or the origin of our faith and our ethnicity.
I have two uncles. They're not Christians. They're actually Buddhist, right? That's the word, right? And well, I would say they are amateur Buddhists because I don't think they are that serious about their faith. And I once had this conversation with my mom because my two uncles are her brothers, and I told my mom that they have their religions, their faith is not right. But actually, my mom, she has this kind of concept that, you know, everyone has their freedom to choose whatever they want to believe. But I told my mom that, you know, there's a consequence. You know, the truth, there's just one truth, you know. So I don't think they should, even though they think they have their freedom, but I don't think they should have this faith. Right now, you know, since I serve at church and basically I serve I serve the Mandarin congregation here, and basically our congregation is our young Chinese students here and also young Chinese professionals. We try to attract more Chinese students to the church, but there's, you know, one challenge. That is that a lot of Chinese students, they think that Christianity is just a Western cultural thing, and it has nothing to do with their lives and their work. But I think one thing, I would say that is a tragedy. That if you look back at the Chinese history, the earliest record that we have ever found right now of Christian ministers coming to China can be traced back to the Tang Dynasty. That's I think that's around 1,000 years ago. They were from ancient Rome, and and also during the history of China, there were several periods that Christianity was like one of the most influential religion in China, and also they have done a lot of great things, like building schools, building hospitals. They helped a lot of poor people in China, and I think that's a good thing. But the bad thing is that right now China is a non-Christian country, right? No one talks about it. So we have already forgotten our history.
Appreciate that, Jackson. But just to think about what DeAndre was saying, you have a lot of false cults that have risen up, like the Hebrew Israelites, you have the Kemites and the Egyptology and the Moors. All these people claim Christianity is white man's religion. A lot of people are saying Christianity was founded at the Council of Nicaea. We hear that. And in my song, I talk about, Wikipedia theologians, it's Google historians. Like,
Love this term.
It's ridiculous. Like, when you look at the Council of Nicaea, bishops came with their Bibles to debate theology. So they're coming with Bibles to debate a faith that didn't exist. Is what you're telling me. So you really need to go back, do your research. But the fact of the matter is this: the Gospel of Mark, written by an African man. We have Jethro, who was the father-in-law of Moses, African man. We have Zipporah, his wife. We have Simon of Cyrene, who carried the cross with Christ. We have Augustine, Athanasius, Cyril of Alexandria. We actually have the school of hermeneutics in Alexandria and, of North Africa. We have hermeneutical schools. There were two schools. It was Alexandria and somebody help me if you know it was Northern Africa. We might have to cut that out. But we got Northern African schools of hermeneutics that we actually, it was Alexandria, but it was somewhere else with an A that I can't think of right now. But we have hermeneutical schools from North Africa, and we have Ethiopia, which was actually the first Christian nation, and it's actually had Christianity in it for over 1,500 years. So white man's religion, that's just a lie. And we see the hurt, we see the pain of a lot of people. And but like my brothers have said, there's no balance of what the church has gotten right. What about the Salvation Army? How about the Red Cross? How about all these hospitals that are named after Christ? Christ Advocate Hospital. Yeah, we have all these contributions. So if you're going to take the bad, and there's been a lot of bad done in the name of Christ, we have to deal with that, brothers and sisters. We can't sweep it under the rug, but we have to also acknowledge much of the good. But I want to continue just hearing about white man's religion, your thoughts on that.
Just like many have mentioned, I think Christianity historically and geographically, obviously, is in the Middle East. The first Christians, the actual word Christians, was the Church of Antioch. And we see that church was composed of various different ethnic national groups. So I want to point that out. And also I think we have to look at hermeneutics, like how we view the text. And I think a lot of different people come with their own practices, their traditions, their experiences, their emotions to the text, which oftentimes, influences how we view the text and then how we exegete and the application. And so we end up getting some fuzzy theology, and that kind of, messes everything up. And so I think we have to understand that the text was written. The text was written within the world in the Middle East, and so we have to look at it from that perspective, from that culture. And I think a lot of times it's easy for us to impose the text that we want to see. So instead of allowing the text to influence us, in our theology, oftentimes we come to the text with a lot of bags, a lot of presuppositions, pre-understandings, and I think that can heavily influence the way that we view, or the way we answer that question. Somebody mentioned the black liberation theology, and all these things. I think that comes from maybe a poor handle of how we read scripture. So I would really say that, that's how I would kind of approach that. And just the fact that, again, Christianity started first century Palestine. And that from there, then Paul came to Romans, Corinthians, Thessalonians. Then it moved westward. And so I think we really need to remember that Christianity started in the Middle East with a Jewish man. And then after a while it went westward. So no, Christianity is not a white man's religion if you look at just the historical and the geographic implications.
If we also look at where Christianity is growing the most, China and Africa, two nations, countries, continents, areas where there's not a lot of white people. And the schools I was thinking about was the Antiochian school and the Alexandrian schools of hermeneutics that actually help influence the way that a lot of us in the West do hermeneutics now. But a lot of people don't even know that. The way we exegete, the way we look at people who are eisegeting, taking things out of context. And I'd love to hear from other brothers.
From history tells us that Christianity came to India a lot earlier than the colonialism of the English and things like that. So history tells us that Thomas actually came to India, to South India, and he died there sharing the gospel with people. So just even in the first, couple decades after Christ's death, we see Thomas already there preaching and starting local congregations and things like that. So that's way before, any of this has started. So we see, I experience these days that people from South Asia will say that Christianity is a white man's religion. And they'll say that because of English colonialism that spread from the 1600s on. And what they're really seeing is that the English systems for building business, setting up society, culture, building, as was talked about, hospitals and all that stuff, it was connected with Christianity. And a lot of those things were very positive. Building railroads throughout the country would have never happened had colonialism have not come there. So a lot of these things are positive. But what happens when we have Christianity connected to colonialism is that things like the way we worship become connected with Western culture. And Western culture is identified with Christianity in India today because of the way we built these churches in the Western style. Our worship songs are created out of the Western culture. So we've got a couple hundred years now of Western style worship songs that are connected with colonialism. And when you're talking to somebody who's new to the Christian faith or hasn't been exposed to the Christian faith at all, they're saying, wait a second, when you talk to me about Jesus, what I'm hearing is that you're talking to me about a hymn that was written in the 1700s. So what I think in some respects, yes, Christianity is not a white man's religion from the biblical perspective at all. But culturally, today what we see is Christianity is a white man's religion from a cultural perspective. And so what we've done is we've created ways of creating a biblical Christian worship experience that's based on localized or contextualized culture. So it's songs that are sung in the local indigenous way and things like that. And that's really developed on from there. But it is a conversation that I think we need to have when we're talking to people of like, we're sharing Christ. We're not sharing Western culture. So we need to be more clear about that.
And interesting for me, I grew up in a black church, but it was black Caribbean, mostly Jamaican. We had Bahamian, some Nigerian, so some West African, Haitian. And I mean, in our church, it was never a white style at all, preaching wise, song wise. If they did sing white style music, they would blackify it. So that's very interesting to hear that even in India, you know, and I've noticed, I've preached in, you know, churches of different ethnicities, different parts of the world. I have noticed there have been certain churches